Five, four, three, two, one. Good evening and welcome to another live episode on Disqualified Dads. I am your humble host, Coach Farouk, and this is episode 5 of the coaching series. Now, tonight I have a very special guest. Her name is Emma. She's a burnout and wellness coach. She's going to be teaching us some practical tips and tricks to recover from burnout and wellness ultimately. So, yes, and the purpose of the coaching series is just to remind you, is to give you pointers. Sorry, let me start again. The purpose of this coaching series is to bring different coaches on from different backgrounds to help you elevate and improve your life. We will be giving out practical steps and tips to how to then follow through with these. So without further ado, let me bring her on. Hi, Emma. How you doing? You all right?
I'm okay, thanks, Farouk. How are you?
Emma, we're a little bit late, a little bit disheveled, but we'll settle into this nice and easy. Yeah, a little bit disheveled. By the way, we're late, guys, because of me. I take full ownership, accountability, and responsibility. See, coaching 101, take accountability. Emma, I'm taking accountability for my timekeeping. And also, I'm not in this, apologies, I'm not in the studio. I'm out and about hustling, so I've got to make do. Emma, tell us a bit about your background, your coaching, your models. Just tell us a bit about your journey. Why did you become a burnout coach? Just tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, it started back in 2014. I was teaching at a college and I suffered from burnout myself, and it was horrific. It's worse than any depression or anxiety I've had because it absolutely just empties you of any energy, empties you of everything, and makes you feel like the only way out, if it gets that bad, is to end your life. So I then decided to rebuild myself and reinvent myself, and had the idea that I would go into psychology. Mm-hmm. So I left teaching, started working in mental health. I worked in supported living, psychiatric hospitals, prisons, secure units, a whole different range of environments. And then I decided to do my master's in psychology. Okay. And while I was doing that, my dissertation was about how A&E isn't the appropriate place for people to go who are suicidal. So that was going to be my main focus of study. But then I ended up getting a job as a doctor's receptionist, so working at a GP practice. And that was supposed to be temporary while I did my master's in psychology, but life kind of got in the way. I've got a son with additional needs, all kinds of stuff was going on. Mm-hmm. So I stayed at the GP practice, and then I'd already been a qualified hypnotherapist for a while, about 8 years at the time. Mm-hmm. And I asked the senior partner there, who's very open-minded about things like hypnotherapy, I asked him if I could do that with patients, and he said, yeah. So I started doing that. My main area of specialty with hypnotherapy is trauma. It's really good for healing trauma. And I then started an apprenticeship training how to be an assistant practitioner. With that role, I was doing cognitive behavioural therapy with depression and anxiety. And I developed the program myself. I was working for the ADHD service. I developed that program myself. And I then decided to go into coaching because it intrigued me. And I think one of the things that annoyed me about coaching was I was seeing so many people who weren't qualified to be doing what they were doing, who were giving advice on things that they shouldn't have been doing. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to be a good coach and I'm going to train. So I did my coaching training and had to think of a speciality, a niche. First, it was going to be ADHD. But then I saw some horrible statistics, and that was basically that female doctors are 76% more likely to die by suicide than the general population.
Wow.
Male doctors, it's roughly the same, it's slightly higher, but with male doctors, it's something like they're 86% more likely to die by suicide than people of the same socioeconomic status. And just seeing these sky-high suicide rates, it like really upset me, because these are people who, like, the training is intense. It's like, unless you've done it, and I've not done it, I couldn't imagine doing it. You unless you're aware of what it entails, you really don't realise. And I was sort of seeing these people I was working with, and not just the doctors, like the nurses, other allied healthcare professionals, just seeing how stressed everyone was. And it's not their fault. It's the system is broken. And I did a bit more research, and it's not just the UK where this is happening. This is across the board. All around the world.
Okay, so let me just jump into. So you're saying, obviously, working in the say medical field, working with doctors, medical professionals, nurses, you discovered these stats of the rate of doctors and nurses, male and females, unaliving themselves because of the study, the training, the workload, and the general pressure of the hospital environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, GPs are on the list of high rate of suicide too. GPs are really struggling.
Oh, wow. Look at that. I never realised it was this prevalent amongst the medical community, considering, especially, just assume, because doctors, they take the oath to save life, preserve life, you know, and, you know, a job like that is not a job, or that sort of line of work is not something where it can be taken lightly. It's a lifestyle. To work in that field, it's a life choice and a lifestyle. So it's very sad to hear that they come to a point where they no longer want to continue.
Yeah, and a lot of it is because to get into medical school, you've got to get very high grades. There's that competition constantly. And then you get there, and there's even more competition. It's very intense. You're studying for at least 5 years. Then you do your foundation years, and the hours are ridiculous. You're drafted in to do loads of overtime. A lot of responsibility for somebody who's just qualified, really. But then when you get into, like, going into core training, specialty training, all that kind of stuff, again, it's a lot more of the competition to get the right places, to get on the right roles. But then you've got the issues of, like, at the moment, doctors are given posts, and it could be anywhere in the country, and they could have like 3 weeks notice to find somewhere to live and go and live and work. Yeah, and they're taken away from the support network or the people that they know. So yeah, that's an issue as well. But when you've put that much money and time into training, and you get to that point where you think, I can't do this anymore, it really shuts off a lot of other escape routes, because it's like, I have to do this, I've got to stay here. So that's another big risk factor. And also, if you think about how old you are when you start training to be a doctor, you've no idea that what it's like for a start, but what it actually entails. People can tell you, oh, it's hard work, but at that age, it's like, no, I can cope with this.
So I know a doctor, right? And what you said is the medical degree, the doctorate degree, is the hardest one. It's the hardest, the longest degree to do. I mean, they are very academic, clever people ultimately, and, you know, a lot of sacrifices. It's like I said, it is a lifestyle. Once you go into that profession, you've chosen a lifestyle, and it is that high pressure, intense lifestyle, from study to junior to practicing hospital GPs. You know, it's a way of life, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the culture that needs to change. People shouldn't have to devote their entire life and have no life outside of work, like you do when you're a med student and you're like in like a resident doctor. But if you think about how old people are when they start training, like they're dealing with things that, like, I mean, I've worked in mental health and seen things that are unseeable and quite horrific. And I was in my 30s when I started doing that and found it really hard. I couldn't imagine being that young and dealing with all of that. So there's that element of it as well.
Okay, so look, seeing all of this inspired you to then follow your passion and your niche for specifically burnout and wellness coaching. I take it. So yeah, so tell us about that journey. So tell us about your how you devised your models and how you sort of then went into that niche. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that I work on is looking at things like work-life balance. And it's not what people think it is. It's not like having like equal amount of time, equal amount of work at work. It's about having stuff in your life that makes you feel good.
That feeds your soul. So having stuff that soothes your soul away from work. Yeah.
And also, because you're in a stressful situation all the time, your nervous system gets dysregulated. So what I work on is like reprogramming the way that the brain's working to not be in stress mode all the time.
So I would also presume that if they're in that sort of state, or they're also high on adrenaline all the time as well. So they're in that hypersensitive state because they're on the go, the adrenaline's going. And
it's great. I mean, we need that state. We need stress. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. If you've got somebody who's not stressed, who's got to do CPR on somebody, like it's not going to be that effective. But the problem is if it's not dealt with, not managed, and that can happen when you've got very long hours that's going over a very long time. But also there's a culture that you're not allowed to show that you're struggling. So you can like deal with something completely awful and very stressful, and then it's on to the next thing. And what happens is adrenaline only works for so long. Like your body can only produce adrenaline for so long. So what happens is if you're in that fight or flight mode continuously, your liver starts creating the energy. And when that's happening, you have immune system deficiency, so you get ill all the time. And that's where you get to that point of exhaustion. It's like your adrenal glands that are releasing the stuff to kind of make all this happen, you can't do it anymore.
They just give up. Basically, they've run out. They're burnt out. They're done. They need time to recoup and recover.
Yeah. So
very interesting.
A lot of the work I do is about getting people in the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we're in fight or flight mode, we're in sympathetic nervous system, which is where your heart rate speeds up, your blood pressure goes up, breathing rate goes up. It does weird things like shuts down your digestive system and your urinary system, because it's basically an emergency mode. So it's only using the body systems that it needs to get out of that situation. So the prefrontal cortex at the front of your brain is the bit of the brain that does all our rational thinking, emotion regulation. That doesn't get a look in. You're going on like the inner parts of the brain that are more primitive evolutionary wise.
Reactionary brain. So you're operating on the reactionary part of the brain. Not the thinking part. So what we need to do is get the parasympathetic nervous system working, which is our rest and digest mode. So that is where everything's slowed down. Your heart rate's like normal and slow, and your breathing rate's normal. All of your systems are working as they should be. Because if you're in
sympathetic nervous system mode all the time, you can get all sorts of problems. Like, that's why people have things like vomiting, diarrhea, and things like that. I know when I was teaching, if I had time off, I would literally spend, like, I didn't even book off the half terms because we were in a college, we were different. We didn't get all the holidays off. I didn't bother with the half terms because the first week of my annual leave would be sleeping and vomiting.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Okay, is this like an extreme case, or when the symptoms that you're explaining or describing, is this like you've now reached peak, you've burnt out, or is it just where are you on the spectrum of burnout? This is 0, this is burnout, this is normal, this is burnout. That symptom that you've explained, where is that on the spectrum? Is that like you've hit the top end? That's it. You need to recoup.
It wasn't the top end, because the fact that I was still feeling stressed about things meant I was still in stress and not in burnout. Burnout is...
But before, not with just your person, but you know the symptoms that you described before you explained what happened to you. Is that not extreme to say, like, because your liver shuts down and your frontal lobe? I mean, that has to be an extreme.
Yeah. I mean, it is extreme. I wasn't the only one. A lot of people who did the same thing as me were in the same boat. But that's what can happen. It was basically my body was used to, like, just being on the go all the time, and as soon as I had that time to just breathe, then, like, everything just kind of went a bit haywire.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so carry on from this. So when you do stop, so you're in that state. When you do stop, like you said, you start vomiting. You're now in your normal relaxed state, but you're vomiting. Your immune system's down. You don't feel well. You feel just exhausted.
Yeah. So what would have helped me at the time, and obviously this was before I went on to study psychology and the various therapeutic models that I've learned. If I'd have been able to switch that off for breaks during the day, that probably wouldn't have happened. And I'd have also learned how to manage my boundaries a lot better, because it was ridiculous. I was doing night classes, and I was starting work at 8. I'd get to work for about 8 a.m. to start work teaching at 9, and then I would be finishing at 9 at night. Like, and if you think of, like, every lesson's like a mini performance kind of thing. And it's similar to doctors. You don't get a break. If you've got a break, you're doing admin. And then when I was going home, obviously I had marking and all the rest of it to do, and then it was a couple of hours sleep, get up in the morning. And that's what a lot of doctors are going through, because as well as working, they've got to do the studying and everything else on top of that. A lot of doctors now are having to have second careers or second jobs and side hustles and things just to kind of make it meet. So that's another source of burnout too. Just having... Okay,
so look, we understand now what we've got some idea of what burnout is. We have some idea of what is going on in the medical industry, like you've explained. You work in the field. So just a quick question off the bat. Let's say, for example, let's say everything you've described. I say to Emma, this is how I live. This is how I work. I'm always on the go. I don't switch off. When I get home, I just crash out, get up, eat, sleep, repeat every day sort of thing. Work, home, eat, sleep, repeat. What is your first bit of advice or first practical tip that you would give me?
Okay, so the first thing I get people to do is to look at how they're responding to stress and whether or not it is like an adaptive way of coping with stress or a maladaptive way of coping with stress or not coping. And an adaptive way of coping with stress would be, instead of just kind of flaking out, doing something like doing some meditation. I don't like to keep saying, do meditation, because a lot, like, it is like when you're in that position, you want to tell people where to go. But things like, are they taking enough breaks? Are they eating properly, sleeping properly? We'd look at all of that sort of stuff. I also, because there's a high risk of things like suicide, I always screen for depression, suicide, and anxiety, because obviously if somebody's struggling with that, then they need somebody else helping them out with that too. And then we'd look at work-life balance and look at where we can change it, what we can change, where we can put in what it is that you want to do in life. But also we look at values. One of the main causes of burnout is you not working aligned with your values.
Okay, before we go into that, so I just wanted a quick tip, but let's break it down. I want to talk about the work-life balance because obviously I think we're going too fast. Mm-hmm. Now, when you say work-life balance, like you said, work-life balance is not necessarily time, yeah? It's not dependent on time because let's be honest, most of us, even if you work 8 till 5, Monday to Friday, best part of your time is spent at work.
Mm-hmm.
So is there such a thing as even work-life balance, or is it, do you have to accept that best part of your life, big chunk of your week, best productive hours are spent at work? That is just a reality of the working model. So what is your perception of the work-life balance?
There's a lot of criticism about work-life balance and that it can't be achieved as people put theories forward about things like work-life flow, which is just basically going along in a flow, and work and life aren't separate things. With me, I don't know if it's because once a teacher, always a teacher, but with me, I've always been a busy person, so I've always had stuff going on. I thrive off that. If you were to tell me that I had 4 days a week sat doing what I wanted to do, nothing work-related, I don't think I'd be able to cope with that. So it's not saying that you need loads of downtime. What it's saying is that downtime needs to be spent doing something that helps you rest. And rest is productive. We're kind of conditioned as human beings to think we've got to be doing something productive all the time, whereas rest, it is productive, because if you don't rest, you get burnt out, tired, stressed.
You're talking about rest of the mind, not necessarily the body, because you can still be productive. It's just a rest of the mind away from the high pressure situation.
Yeah. I mean, rest of the body is important too. That's where I always like look into things like sleep. But rest of the mind, and that could be doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be your typical meditation. It could be, like, for example, I love boxing. Like, boxing training sessions are amazing for me and I feel great afterwards. So physical exercise is really important in there too. But it could be just doing something like spending time with people who you care about, or even just sat doing absolutely nothing and staring at a wall and just letting your brain like catch up as well.
But is burnout, okay, look, so because the thing with burnout is more mental than it is physical. I mean, from what I understand, it is mental in it. So the burnout is ultimately of the mind, it's the brain. Your computer's got so many windows open continuously. Eventually, your computer slows down because there's too many windows open and it crashes. So you've got to shut it all down, let it all just switch off, and then reboot ultimately, so they come back operating fast. That is what effective burnout is, and it's too many windows open, processors working too hard. You got to start closing it all down and have a good clear up your desktop sort of thing.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So look, Emma, talk to us about. So obviously, look, you've gone into the niche of burnout, obviously after witnessing all of this. So now, can you slowly take us through some of your coaching models? If someone comes to you with burnout, and just slowly work. We've got time, so just slowly work us through some of your techniques, your models, and practical tips that people can take. So look, I'm going to give you the floor to go through it. So just take your time. There's no rush. You don't have to say everything at once. Just slowly work through. Because I remember I went to your LinkedIn class where you talked us through the burnout, the stages, what you do, how to do, all of this. So just talk us through nice and slow, yeah?
Yeah. So I always say that burnout prevention is a lot better than cure. once you get to the point of burnout, it takes a long time to recover. Like, it took me 3 years. It's normally between 1 and 3 years. So the more you can do preventatively, the better. So burnout is chronic stress that's not being managed. So if you've got symptoms of stress, you need to act then. So that's things like stress is very much the physical symptoms. So headaches, insomnia, getting ill all the time, somatic pain, so weird little aches and pains that you can't explain, like the problems with your digestion, like things like IBS are very linked to stress.
Yes.
So if you've got anything like that, I mean, I ignored all kinds of stuff. Like, my jaw didn't unclench for about 3 or 4 years. So it's that feeling of tension. And the thing about stress is, people tend to think, oh, it's not as bad as burnout. Stress is really bad for you. It causes like cardiovascular problems and all kinds of stuff. It can kill you. So people do really need to take stress seriously. So if I have a different approach to if I'm working with someone who's got stress to if I'm working with someone who's got burnout, because burnout is very much a mental health issue. It affects you mentally rather than physically. So if someone was coming to me with stress, I would look at their work-life balance and how they're responding to stress and how they'd like to be able to respond to stress. And then we kind of look at changes that they want to make. It's very much about them, not me telling them what to do or anything like that. And then I help them implement those changes. And with coaching, look at things like mindset issues, things that's holding them back. With healthcare professionals, particularly doctors, a lot of it is guilt. There's such a massive feeling of guilt. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I'm a doctor. I should have it together. I should be resilient. And the problem with resilience is doctors are very, very resilient people. And I hate this idea that it's like, right, oh, you should be more resilient. Like, doctors are coping with things that most people wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
It's not them that's broken, it's the system. So it's giving them skills that are within their control, which is empowering them really, and getting them to prioritize themselves. Is a very hard one. I get a lot of resistance with that of, well, you're telling me to do these things, but I can't because I've got to do this, this, and this, and this. Like, yeah, but you're going to end up burnt out. You need to prioritize yourself. And I reality check everything. Like, I can't give somebody who's got very little time daft amounts of homework to do. So all the advice that I give them is stuff that they can do in a short period of time. And then once we've looked at the work-life balance, we look at boundaries and setting boundaries. And again, this is going to meet a lot of resistance. And that's not just boundaries at work, but boundaries in life.
Okay.
Because if you're a caring person, it doesn't just stop at work. You're like that in life. So it's thinking, okay, am I bending over backwards for somebody and not getting anything in return?
So they're people pleasing, too much people pleasing, even outside of work.
Yeah. And I know what it's like. I mean, when people find out what I do, especially when I worked in mental health, it's like, oh, Emma can be my therapist, sort of thing. If you've been talking to people about the problems all day long, and the people who would see me are going in there because they've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So there's a lot going on, and the area where I live, there's a lot of like child sexual abuse. It's like shocking the amount there is in the area where I kind of live and work. And if you're hearing about that all the time, it's really difficult. And then if you've got somebody who's like, well, I can tell Emma all my problems. And I mean, I'm there for my friends, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you it's like you're not even having a conversation with a friend. because
they're talking at you, and you're
yeah,
absorbing all this negativity,
yeah,
and this negativity is manifesting inside of you. And I could tell already this is not healthy. I try and avoid generally anyone negative or moaning, someone that moans or
mm,
whines in any of my circles now. I avoid them like the plague. Polite, in and out. I can see where the conversation's headed. It has no value whatsoever. It's just
yeah,
negativity. And when you're absorbing this negativity, it's infectious.
yeah,
And they're planting this negativity into your subconscious.
mm,
You walk away, and then in your own time, this is all playing around in your own system. You got to stay away from this. Can't
yeah,
be absorbing to all this negativity. It's not good.
yeah, definitely. And I've had one particularly very, very toxic friendship that was emotionally abusive, to be honest. And it's like you can breathe again when you get rid of these people out of your life, because you have to prioritize yourself. You're not responsible for anybody else. And that, I mean,
You have
obviously,
to love you. Yeah, you have to love yourself first. You got to, let's say, prioritize. You have to love yourself first. You have to be in a good place. And if you're in a good place, you're healthy, your mind is clear, your glass is half full, then you've got something to offer and give. But if your glass is empty and you're absorbing all of this other negativity as well, you're not in a position really. You have to help
yeah,
yourself first, ultimately.
yeah, definitely. And that's something that I look at with my clients. And it's also about looking at how you respond to that. And like, particularly with the work related stuff, if you're subject to a lot of abuse from patients, like verbal abuse, it can be really difficult. I know people who work in mental health are often physically abused. So it's like looking at that, and that can be traumatic. And like sort of learning how to set boundaries with that, because boundary setting is really important when it comes to people abusing you. But a problem with that is a lot of people do not feel supported by their workplace. It's like we've got this zero tolerance to abuse sign up, they're everywhere, but yet patients can abuse staff and nothing ever happens.
Okay. And that obviously is having an adverse effect on people's mental, because you're absorbing this negativity and this abuse all day.
Yeah,
That is adding to the stress levels, which is then
yeah,
leading to burnout.
yeah. And I will have to give a shout out to the receptionists as well, because they're like on like the front desk. They're the first point of contact. The amount of abuse that like A&E receptionists, GP receptionists are getting is unreal. So it's the whole workforce, really, anyone patient facing. And I get that patients are frustrated, they're waiting, like they can't get a GP appointment, they're on a waiting list, they've had to wait for ages in A&E, but it's not the staff's fault. And I think that is something that needs to change, needs to be taken more seriously. And if somebody's been abusive to staff, that there's got to be a consequence rather than like nothing really happens. I mean, there was a case not so long ago where a nurse got stabbed for just doing a job, and the patient got in an argument with her, stabbed her, and it's just not acceptable. If it was anywhere else, there'd be more done to stop it from happening, but because it's healthcare, and especially like you've got a duty of care to patients, it's kind of swept under the carpet a little bit. And sometimes the staff who were abused are blamed as well, which really isn't fair. I mean, obviously, sometimes there's things you can do to de-escalate the situation, and de-escalation training should be given to everyone who works in any aspect of healthcare, because it's an important skill to have. So you reducing that situation before it even gets there. But at the end of the day, it's not okay to shout at people. It's not okay to.
Yeah. No. Look, it is clearly very public-facing environment. It's high stress, doctors are dealing with injuries, screaming patients, life and death. I mean, I think we've got a clear picture of the environment. I mean, I feel stressed. I feel stressed just listening to what they're going through. I'm feeling stressed. I mean, I might need a coaching session after this, I think. I feel like I'm burning out here. Just listen to it, right? So look, let's now go towards your coaching model. So we know the system's not right. We know there's problems, but like I said, we're here for positivity.
Yeah.
We are spreading positivity. Now, you are the escape for this people. You are the knight in shining armor. You are the coach, the burnout and wellness coach. So how do you now capture these people, and how do you take them on this journey to recovery? Like I said, give us a bit more, give more insight into some of your coaching models, or specific practical steps that someone can implement in their life from some of your models that they could start tomorrow. So I've come to you, I'm really burnt out, I'm stressed, this and that, boom, boom, boom. You know, I'll say to you, yeah, I'm dealing with public, I'm taking a lot of abuse, a lot of negativity, I'm overworked, I don't have enough breaks, enough food. Give me some practical steps that I can take away, that the viewers can take away with them.
Okay. So one way would be to get that parasympathetic nervous system going, and there's two ways you can do it. There's top down, so that's where you think your way out of it, but that's very difficult because the thinking part of your brain's shut off. Or another way is like the bottom up way of dealing with it. So that is where you're getting a signal from your body organs that tell the brain that everything's okay. So you can control your heart rate to some extent, but it's not very easy to do. The easiest thing that you can control is your breathing.
Okay, this is good. Breathing.
So if you slow down and deepen your breathing, so if you're very anxious, your breathing's fast and shallow.
Okay.
If you then slow and deepen your breathing, your brain will think, well, it can't be that dangerous if you're breathing that slowly. Everything must be okay. And then
breathe into your stomach. This is breathing into your stomach. So talk me through it. Give me the tips. How would I do it? So I've come to you stressed now. I'm shortness of breath. How would you say to me, right? So how would you slow my breathing down now?
Okay. So the first thing to do is close your eyes. So you're kind of just focusing on your breathing.
Okay.
And then if you take a big deep breath and fully expand your lungs so you can't take any more air, and then really slowly release that until your lungs are completely empty, and just repeat that a few times. So I'd get them to repeat that until they feel calmer. But there's other things you can do. You can involve sensory information, so it's focusing your attention, because if you've got the stress where your body's running at 100 miles an hour, you might also have the stress where your brain's at 100 miles an hour. So you can slow your brain and your thoughts down by focusing your attention. So I do mini mindful blasts, and these take minutes. Okay, sometimes not even a minute. So
with the breathing, I'm already feel relaxed. Even with one or two breaths, I feel relaxed already. Like I can feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
tell me about this mini mindful blast. I'm liking the sound of this. The mindful blast.
So you're using all of your senses. So if I was to start off, I could do a visual one where I'm looking at something in like every detail. So you do kind of 3 rounds of these blasts, and for each round you're taking 3 deep breaths, and then like I've just done with you, with the fully inhaling and fully exhaling. And for the first 3 breaths, you would look at an object into the distance. So I always start with distant, middle range, close. So you'd look into the distance and look at an object. You can't really see it in that much detail, but you're kind of focusing on it and what you can see around it. Then you move into the middle distance, you can see more detail, start to spot like the more intricate things about that object. And then the object that's near to you, you can really start to look at textures and details. So you can do these either one at a time. So you do the visual ones, you do the full round of like 3. So if you think 3 by 3, 3 rounds of 3 deep breaths, or you can combine them. So for the hearing one, the auditory one, you'd listen for a sound, and it's like with this one, it's good to close your eyes so you can focus. listen for a sound outside of the room that you're in or far away, if you're outside, say, and listen for something that's close. So, for example, I can hear birds singing outside. Something that's close, I can hear the fan on my computer. And then for the last one, you're listening to the sound of your own breathing. Obviously, with people that have got sensory issues, so people who are neurodivergent, or people that if they listen to the sound of their own breathing, that would make them panic, then you'd choose something else. You'd maybe listen to another sound nearby. Then you've got tactile. So this is the feeling of touch. So you can do that by just using 3 rounds of 3 different materials. And if they contrast, it's really good. But you're working with whatever you've got at the time. So, for example, I could have my mobile phone there. That's very smooth. I can feel that. You can rub your thumb and finger together and feel the fingerprints. That goes through me. I can't do that. But that's one thing that you could do. Or like feel all the grooves on the palm of your hand. It could be something simple like, I'm not going to do it because I've got I've got sensory issues and this type of fabric is like, oh, no. But like you could feel the fabrics of your clothes, your hair, that kind of thing. So you're using all of those sensory things. They're the main ones, but there's other ones such as, like I've covered the sight, sound, and tactile.
Sensory,
But there's you can do it with smells as well. So you can have 3 different smelling things. Good one to do when like you're having your breakfast in the morning. So you could say sniff your coffee, maybe a piece of toast, and then something else. And again, you're doing it for those 3 breaths. One of my favourite is kinesthetic. So that is where you're aware of where things are positionally, like where parts of the body are positionally. So I do this every morning before I get out of bed. Instead of getting up, my alarm's gone off, like instantly jumping out of bed with my head going, all right, I've got to do this, I've got to do getting my son out of bed, maybe doom scrolling or checking emails, like Chris was saying last week. The way you start your day is really important.
Yes.
What I do is, the first thing I do when I wake up is I pay attention to my feet, where they're positioned. There's a bit of tactile involved, so I'll think, are they under the duvet, not under the duvet, what's the temperature like? But then I'll pay attention to my hands, where they are positionally. I can then move them and like just be aware of where they are in space. And then it's like my head. So you kind of thinking about 3 different positions on your body, but it's more the thinking about where they are in space. So like that's why Tai Chi is a good example of this. That's very much kinesthetic, because you've got that movement and yoga and things like that. So you've got that, but then there's taste. Again, you could do this where you have a sip of coffee and like a piece of toast or whatever. But say you've only got a cup of coffee and you've got to do the 3 rounds, you could maybe like focus on how it feels to go into your mouth rather than the taste, and then focus on the actual taste, and then focus on how your mouth feels afterwards or something like that. So you having basically 3 different experiences in those 3 rounds.
Okay, that's the mindful blast. So what does that give you? What would that give you?
So it's focusing your attention.
Okay, right.
So it's stopping the racing thoughts.
Okay, so it's slowing the brain down. So it's just slowing the brain down to the present.
Yeah, but also as well, it strengthens your frontal lobes. So
okay, right.
So when you're struggling with your like inner workings of the brain, going off on one, if you like, if you've got strong frontal lobes, you're more likely to be able to reason and think your way out.
Part of the brain,
yeah. But also it kicks in that parasympathetic nervous system, so it stops all that heart racing and.
Okay, so it just brings you back to a neutral state rather than the high stress adrenaline state. It just relaxes you down and keeps you in the present. And
Yeah.
Gets you more on a Zen set. Okay.
Yeah. And if you repeat it, so if you do it like at least once a day, ideally, but the more of these you can do throughout the day, the better. Like I'll talk about the two kind of networks in the brain, network systems. So you've got the default mode network, which is active when you don't have to pay attention to anything. So it's like where your mind's wandering around from one thing to another. So what am I going to have for my tea? Or that film I watched? Like the brain just does. And then when you do a task, it goes into task positive mode. So that's where you're focusing your attention. When people aren't working, when they've got high stress jobs, because they're in that task positive mode all the time, you start to then spend a lot of time in the default mode network.
Okay.
The problem is, like, we do need it. We need to go in the default mode network. But if when your brain's wandering around, it's full of unhelpful thoughts, that's where we get rumination and problems with things like depression and anxiety. So what the repeated mindfulness does is it trains the brain that it's okay to be in task positive mode, but not be busy, to do something.
It's interesting, very interesting. I have to say, Okay, yeah. Any other, and then what do you follow on from that then? Where would you go from there?
So once people have learned that, I then look at healthy habits. So I give people a habit tracker, and ways that you can get the healthy habits into your life is habit stacking. So I'll mention quite a few there. Getting the mindfulness in by putting it into your morning routine. It could be that in between patients, you just take 3 deep breaths or something like that. So you're kind of giving yourself that like little bit of downtime. But also, when you learn any new skills, it's really effortful because your brain's got to make new connections. So the more you repeat it, the stronger those connections get, and it becomes in nature. So it's like, I know that you do the fitness stuff too. When you get into it, it's very difficult to stop. It's like
once it becomes a habit. Once a habit is formed, after so many days, once a habit is formed, then the brain no longer requires energy to actually execute because it's now part of the habit.
And if you're injured or for any reason you have to have time off, how hard is it to get back into? It's like really difficult, even though you know you'll love doing it. So it's about like keeping on top of those habits and making sure you're.
So tell me more about your planner. See, I like this because, like I said, every coach that I know, or all the successful people and all the CEOs that I've read the bios and all the podcasts I've listened to, they all have, like I said, the calendar, the tracking. Some of them track macros, they track their workouts, they track their sleep, they track their meditation, they track and log everything. So tell me more about your habit tracker. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, so it's basically a tick sheet. So you basically tick off when you've done the thing, but it's got like getting enough water, staying hydrated. If that's if that's an issue, what you can do is have a glass near your sink, and every time you go in the kitchen, get yourself a glass of water and drink it. I had one of those, the water bottles with the times on. And I love a bit of a challenge. So if I was behind, I'd make sure I was on top of that. And then you've got like eating nourishing food rather than crap. And I've got other things in there like glimmers. So a glimmer is the opposite of trigger. So a trigger is something that triggers a response that's like, it is overused, the word trigger. So we're going to stick with what it's supposed to mean, which is it triggers off a mental health illness symptom. So a lot of people say, "Oh, you've triggered me and made me angry." That's not a trigger. So it could be something like remind you of a bad memory or
trauma response. Triggers an old trauma response. Or
it makes you feel anxious or alone or isolated or something like that. So a glimmer is the opposite of that. It's a little brief moment where we feel connected.
Feel good. Yeah.
And we feel good.
Feel good hormone.
So I teach people glimmer-seeking behaviour.
Okay.
So that's where I go 5 a day like the veg. Obviously, the more you can do, the better. And if you've not ticked off the 5, you go seeking the behaviour. So that could be going giving someone a compliment, going telling a joke, like ringing someone up who you've not spoken to for a while and talking about.
I like this. Yeah. So you specifically, okay, this is quite. You specifically have on that tracker for the day, gleamer seeking behaviour. So I might add that into my little daily habits. I think, that's quite interesting. So you specifically think, right, this is what triggers a glimmer, like, feel good hormone, like telling a joke, ringing someone, chit-chatting, maybe socializing.
Yeah.
Build it into the tracker, yeah?
Yeah. And I've also got on there laughter, because laughter is brilliant. It calms down the nervous system.
It's even smiling, just if you just, they reckon, smile just in the mirror at yourself, or just the act of smiling releases gleams in the brain. Like, is that correct?
Yeah, so it releases things like dopamine, endorphins, which are the things that make us feel good. But when we connect with other people, we release oxytocin. So you've probably heard quite a lot about dopamine and the bad stuff around it. So people being addicted to scrolling.
I've got that. Listen, guilty. I'm doom scrolling. Yeah, I'm addicted to doom scrolling. It's that dopamine release is dangerous. Yeah, so people who design computer games and social media networks have purposefully gone for releasing dopamine. So the problem with dopamine is it's like chemically structured. It's something called a monoamine. So it's got a very simple chemical structure. So it doesn't last very long, and that's why you need to keep getting hits of it. Whereas we've got something called oxytocin, which is a neuropeptide with a much bigger, more complicated chemical structure. So it's a slow burner. And when we connect with other people, we produce oxytocin. Okay. So I kind of use this example to help you realise the difference between dopamine and oxytocin. When you start a relationship with somebody, it's dopamine. Yeah. 100%.
You're running on. Yeah, you're running on the high.
You're on a high. You're on. It's like a drug. You're just on a high. You're on a high. Yeah. Especially those early few days, that excitement, that dopamine. It's addictive.
It is, and it is very much an addiction. And you're getting those slow bursts, but there's a lot of anxiety involved. Oh, they've not responded to that text. Oh, they've said something wrong, and all of that. So dopamine hits make you very anxious and psychologically unstable. Whereas when you get to know somebody and you like have that connection, you release the oxytocin, and that makes you feel a lot more safe, grounded, stable. So the more oxytocin we can release,
but just to clarify, but just understand. So look, dopamine will give you that buzz, the high, the butterflies. Yeah, great. But oxytocin will give you that. It's more a secure, comfort, longevity, longer lasting. But it's not the high. You're not going to feel like the dopamine high. Yeah. It's more stable. It's more mellow. So it's like mellow. So oxytocin is a more mellow hit, where dopamine is just like it's okay. Wow.
So laughter with other people. I mean, watching a comedy can be great as well, but when you laugh with other people, you're producing oxytocin. Okay. And I read a study that said that we can get some effects from like something that's rehearsed. So, for example, if you share that little in-joke with somebody and you know that you do that, they're going to say, you can get some effect from that, but that kind of uses the conscious areas of the brain. And if it's like something that's more off the cuff and spontaneous, that affects you more emotionally. So it's using those emotion centers, which are deep in the brain and involved in the fight or flight response. So it can help to calm down that. So I've got a habit of I wouldn't do this with a client or professionally at all because it's not appropriate. But with a friend, if they're going through a bit of crap time, make them laugh. And that kind of instantly, I've gone with people sat there crying in front of me, like not knowing what to do next, to we're just sharing a joke and having a laugh.
So lighten the situation.
Yeah.
Make light of it effectively, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why it is very common for healthcare professionals to have that gallows humour. So you have to laugh because otherwise you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I know. I've worked on a railway, and there's a lot of, as you can imagine, there's a lot of back injuries, they call it, and jumpers and deaths and bodies, and so you see the ambulance, 5 people. You go on a track. It's just a dark humour. The emergency services dark humour. They've got their own humour, just so it's not taken too seriously. So yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, I suppose you have to. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this is going in my book, which is coming out in
yes. So
just over a week. Yeah.
What's your book going to be called, and where is it going to be? What platform is it going to be? Is it going to be Amazon?
Yeah. So it's going to be called the Sustainable Doctor Framework, and it's basically a manual, a stress management manual for doctors. So it's filled with a little bit of science. So one of my beta readers actually described it as, and this is the best review I've ever had in my life of anything, as a perfect mix of soul, science, and sarcasm. So I want that on my gravestone.
Great.
Sums me up. But yeah, it's kind of got not too much theory because doctors have studied the human body and mind. So, but it's kind of explaining why I'm getting people to do things. And then there's activities to do. A lot of it's like reflective stuff, but I've got online resources that people can get to from the book through scanning QR codes to help them. So that could be things like worksheets or guided meditations. And it talks them through the process that I go through in my coaching program. And like the last part of the program is paying it forward. So what I want to do is create cultural change. So get people to pay it forward onto colleagues, to like if they're in a senior position, dealing with more junior doctors, to model that it's okay to struggle, to ask about the well-being as well as how they're doing in the job. I mean, a lot of doctors I know do this already, but it's kind of in healthcare, you've got it's called see one, do one, teach one. So you get something demonstrated, you're doing it yourself, and then you go and teach someone else. So it's very much based on that. So yeah, it goes through the program, and there's also a case study in there. So it's one of my clients who's given me consent to share her story, anonymized, and how she's worked through the process and what differences that has made to her life. So it's going to be available on Amazon from the 12th of May. You can join the wait list and get a starter pack, which includes chapter 1, a 3-minute guided meditation, some digital postcards with helpful quotes from the book, and a poster for your staff room to remind you that burnout is not your destiny. If you manage stress, you don't have to get there. What I will say, if someone's burnt out, they can read the book, but a book isn't going to really help you. You need that one-to-one with somebody.
Coaching. So talking about that one-to-one coaching, if someone wants to take up your coaching services, where can they get hold of you? What is your website? I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, so my website is Programs, spelled the English way with the E's.
Programs, Programs,
yeah, so 2 M's, ES.
Yes, programs.
.emmaleivesley.com.
Leivesley.com. I'll put it on the screen so if someone sees it.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel with a podcast and stuff, so people can find me through that.
All right, good stuff. So yeah, just gonna say on you, what's your channel called on YouTube again? Is it?
It's Emma Leivesley Coaching.
Emma Leivesley Coaching, right? So yeah, so you're on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. I know you're on LinkedIn, and obviously this is your website address: programs.emmalevesley.com.
Yep.
Yeah, Emma, that dopamine and oxytocin stuff, very interesting. I like it. I love it. So yeah, I think that's a bit of a positive end. Positive end. Burnout, like I said, we're trying to spread positivity, but burnout, medical field, doctors. There's an element of, I can see the high stress and pressure there. So look, it's good to finish on a positive note and on a high. So look, appreciate your time. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I'm gonna go out looking for some oxytocin myself and put that on my daily list, finding some gleamers here. So yeah, appreciate your time, Emma. Guys, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, follow, and share. We're here every Wednesday, 8 p.m. We're bringing on different coaches with different areas and backgrounds and specialities to try and help you elevate your life. Emma, final word. Anything you want to put out there? Final word.
Yeah, I would say it's okay to struggle and it's okay to ask for help.
That's nice. You know what? That's really nice thing to say. Emma, thank you again. Guys, thank you for watching Disqualified Dads. We will see you on the next one.
Thank you.
5, 4,